Welcome once again to Interludes with Chris Mackenzie. John Carger, well-known broadcaster, and Ballatomain, we are about to discover, has come back into the studio, and we're going to do some more about his early life, which is becoming totally fascinating. Welcome back, John. Thank you for coming in again.
I hope the listeners find it fascinating.
Well, I hope so too. I am. And if you've only got one listener, well, tough. Yeah. So we are back. You have gone to the theatre and to see your first ballet. Accidentally, because you actually went to see the opera.
Yes, I went to see the opera, and the ballet was on, and my lady friend had great difficulty in talking me into spending sixpence to see a ballet. And I think I mentioned the last time that the first ballet was Pomona, which was typical, the kind of thing I expected, but I hated. I still hate. The second ballet was the Rex Progress, which was very interesting, was drama rather than dance. Okay. And the third ballet was the third act of the Nutcracker. And the middle of that, it was quite pleasant and so on, but nothing to make me terribly excited. A man came on and danced a Russian tripak, the cobbler step, this kind of thing. And I'd never seen a man dance properly, masculinely. Yeah. I mean, every man dancer I've ever seen was in tights, acting like a sissy. And I was bowled over. It's ridiculous. The man's name was Claude Newman. He was not a great dancer. But to me, I'd never seen a man dancing in a manly fashion. So anyway, I went again, and I became a regular. I became hooked. I think I saw just about every performance of Sadler's Wells Ballet between 1936 and the outbreak of war. Really? Because they only played twice a week. They played Tuesday night and Saturday afternoon.
So you went to every performance?
I went to every performance of the ballet. I used to go to some operas, but every performance of the ballet was rather hard because even though the entrance was in sixpence, to be sure of getting in, you had to arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning. This is something you wouldn't see in Australia. No, you went and paid tuppence to a stool man. There was a man there who took tuppence from you, and he put down a little wooden stool outside the gallery door, and when you came back at night, there was a whole row of stools with your number on it. You present your number, you had your place in the queue. So when the performance, when they let the people in, you were near the front of the stalls, depending how front of the queue, depending on what time you arrived, you see.
What a good idea.
I know.
Never heard of that.
Well, that was done all the time because the gallery was always sold out. There were queues and queues. Sometimes we slept overnight to get to be there first thing in the morning. First sleeping overnight, then to be there at 7 o'clock, and then going to work, after work coming down, grabbing a bite to eat somewhere, and then standing in the queue again, and then rushing upstairs.
Oh, good.
Incidentally, if there happened to be any seats left 5 minutes before the performance started, which did occur, but more with opera than ballet, you could get in for fourpence.
And you used that sometimes, didn't you?
I did sometimes. I didn't have sixpence. Oh yes. However, I became a mad ballatomain. So much so, of course, everybody in the gallery they were all ballatomains, and we did nothing but talk about ballet. And naturally, I began to mix in a social circle for the first time in my life. I'd never had any family life.
Wonderful.
So I finally had some people I could go and see and talk about something we always liked, you see. So that was a big event in my life. And I also met some dancers who went to the gallery. Dancers played had a lot of different events in my life. Some coming up later on if you're getting that far. But the one thing in those days, you couldn't get pictures of the ballet. Nowadays, all the companies put out pictures that you can buy. Yeah. Those that you couldn't. Now, I had a very old, not a Leica, but a similar camera, with a very f2 lens, and I used to take pictures of the ballet from the gallery on 33 millimeter, millimeter film, like an ordinary film, and it's sort of a tiny little thing, and there was a very small rectangle in the middle, which was amplified. It gave a very grainy picture. But I actually had pictures of the dancers at Sadler's Wells, which I hawked around the gallery at threepence a time, and made a penny profit. So I mean, I was a photographer for a while, which led to something else later on. You don't know what I've done. I think I've had 30 different professions according to my autobiography. Anyway, the thing is, I met dancers. I also went to other shows, of course. Now, among the shows I went to was a thing called, there was a little review in a tiny little theatre in the basement of some office building in Tottenham Court Road called the Grafton Theatre. They had a review on, and I went to see this for nothing, because somebody knew somebody. I wasn't going to spend money on a review. And had some dancers in it. That's how I got into the dancers, got me a ticket. And I finished up operating a follow spot for this little review. So anyway, there were all these dancers in this review, and all are dancing in the gallery, and all out of work, and all wanted to dance. And if you're a dancer, dancing is a religion.
Absolutely.
Much more important than money.
Yep.
So anyway, the thing is, we talked together, and I decided it would be a nice thing if I became another Diaghilev.
Well, there's an ambition for you.
I
Why not?
I hope the public knows that Diaghilev was responsible for the emergence of the Russian ballet into Western Europe in 1909 and became the dominating figure in the theatre arts field in classical music, opera and ballet and things like that. Anyway, I wanted to be a Diaghilev, run a ballet company. It was a great year, 1938, because in London there were two different Russian ballet companies. There was Sadler's Wells, there was Ballet Rambert, and Anthony Tudor started his London Ballet in the East End of London. I attended the first night of everything that came on. Every first night I was there in the gallery. Every first night. It came in very handy later on when I came to Australia, that I saw all those things. However, I talked to the other dancers. We agreed that we had enough dancers, and one of the dancers, Maria Sanina, used to be the Russian ballet. Her name was Bridget Kelly. She was a good needlewoman, could take charge of the wardrobe. Others could make scenery. We had a choreographer, John Regan. We had a musician, pianist who was a conductor, and he knew instrumentalists who were out of work, too, wanted to work. It was just during the Depression, 1930s. Everybody was out of work, including me. I was in and out of jobs all the time. I wasn't ever employed on a full-time basis.
Right.
You were employed by the hour. You went in there. I walked around the street, looked at a factory, or I went to the Labour Exchange first. Every morning, you had to sign on to get your 15 shillings dole. But then I went around the factories. Any work? If there was work, they took me on. When the job was finished, I was out. Threepence 3 farthings an hour and out.
Threepence 3 farthings. It's a very long time since I heard that amount of money quoted at 3 farthings.
I know. Anyway, when I was working full time, I got 30 shillings a week.
Whoops.
Yes, 60 hours.
60 hours for 30
Sixpence an hour. That was high money.
Yes, it was. Indeed, it was.
Anyway, the thing is that we got together, the artists, authors, musicians, dancers, all connected with ballet, and we discussed the possibility of starting a ballet company. Now, I didn't do any of those arty things. To this day, the only instrument I play is a gramophone. Yeah. I can't play an instrument. I can't sing. I can't dance. I appeared in a ballet once. That will be later in the story. At the age of 60. We discussed this. And I was supposed to be the businessman. I had no experience whatsoever. Now, my father was a diamond merchant. He thought he was dealing in diamonds, put it that way. And he knew a man called Charles Claw, who many years later, after I left, became Sir Charles Claw. He was one of these big property developers. Now, he introduced me to him and said this, my son wants to start a ballet company. How about putting some money into it? I must have been terrible. I must have been dirty and unshaven and God knows what, and he wasn't obviously very impressed. And he said, well, if he can produce me the dancers and the choreographer and the designer and an orchestra and has it all together ready to make a season, I'll look at it. I went back to my people and we went on that basis. Everybody their own job, to rehearse ballets, to design clothes for ballets and everything like this.
Well done.
It's 1938.
Yeah.
Now, the point is that in 1938 we were beginning to be ready. We were really in rehearsal, if you can put it that way. Everybody doing other jobs at the same time, of course. And John Regan, who was the choreographer, took some of the dancers to Alexandra Palace, where they did experimental television.
Really?
Now this might surprise some people here, that England had a regular television service from 1936 onwards. Very primitive, it was bare cameras. And the cameras were huge and couldn't be moved.
Right.
And the idea was, this was experimental television, ballet on television. There were two huge cameras. In front of each camera was a space marked out, which this camera could cover.
Yep.
The two beside each other made a big enough room for some dancing to take place. So John Regan went up there with what was the beginning of my company. I claim my company was on television. It wasn't. It was the dancers from my company. It doesn't matter. And it didn't have a name then. And he arranged choreography in such a way that you did a jeté, a leap, starting in front of one camera and landing in front of the other one.
Wow.
I mean, it was really experimental. A man called Stanley Bate was in charge of the operation, who comes back into my life later on. So anyway, we did that for a bit, but we were rehearsing. And the year was 1938. There was a little matter, something happened in Munich. And of course, Munich, there wasn't any question of backing from Charles Clore.
No.
So Chamberlain came back and talked about peace in our time and all that kind of thing, you see. Our dancers were still rehearsing, but I mean, there wasn't any prospect of coming on. And then the first fright went away, and of course artists don't really keep up with the politics of the thing. We believed Chamberlain, peace in our time.
Of course.
And went on planning our season. And we planned our season to open at the Lyric Theatre Hammersmith in September 1939.
A bad month.
Yes. The point is that by the time that came along, we had to make our costumes for the production and the scenery, which we did, and there was some music was written for the ballets. It was all the real thing, because the ideal thing is for a ballet to be created by the choreographer, the designer, and the composer all together. Elizabeth Lutchins was the composer. Doesn't mean anything to you in Australia today. She was an important composer in a day. Anyway, everything was ready except everybody was working. The dancers were making costumes, so was I. I somehow, I've got a gift with a needle. I think I've shown you some of my designs, but the thing is, I know that I made costumes for a ballet called Big Top, which is ballet about a circus.
Oh, lovely.
And in it, they had horses, dancers, acting like horses and this kind of thing. And for this was not special music. We used William Tell ballet music for that. And I've actually got a little bit of this. Now, this was a ballet called The Big Top, staged, sorry, it was not staged in September 39, in November 39. Yeah. I'll say the ending first. The point is what happened was the theatre, all the theatres were closed when the war broke out. 2 months later, the Phoney War, they reopened them. We wanted to go into the Lyric Hammersmith, and they'd put a variety building there, and we did a single performance at the Collins Music Hall in Islington. One performance. I think we were the first theatre to ever open on a Sunday. I think the other theatres opened on the Monday, and then in November we opened at the Lyric Hammersmith and ran for 3 months, which was as long as any company. No, we didn't take any money. We didn't make any money. We were working on a percentage. Everyone got £1 a week and a share of the profits. We had a 20-piece orchestra.
Good grief.
Complete scenery, complete costumes, complete quarter ballet. Some very good dancers who later on became famous in the Royal Ballet and people like that. It was a very good company in 1939. At any rate, anybody who went got satisfaction, but we didn't have very big houses.
So we're going to hear a bit of this music.
I think this is not a bad idea. You actually have an example of the kind of ballet I was making costumes for and managing the box office.
Terrific. That was the Pas de Six, the William Tell ballet music.
Big Top.
You and all your lot at the Big Top.
The Big Top.
1939, November.
Produced by a company called the Three Arts Ballet. We had
Is that what you called yourselves?
Well, let me explain. We had a meeting. I told you it was a cooperative thing. Everybody shared the costs and did the work, including everything under the sun. I did myself as well. We had a meeting to decide what to call it. And Lisa Brionda, who's going to turn up again in this thing if we go on with it, she turned out to be the director of the Channel 9 Ballet in Melbourne one day, much later. Lisa Brionda was a ballerina, and she said, well, ballet consists of dancing, music and painting. Let's call it the Three Arts and all. In those days, every ballet had to be in French. When they played the Nutcracker, it wasn't the Nutcracker. It was Casse-Noisette. Yeah. It was not the Nutcracker. Nobody called Swan Lake was Lac de Seine, and the Three Arts Ballet was Les Ballets Trois Arts. Les Trois Arts. You see, so that was the name of the company that played there.
Sounds much grander in French.
Well, I mean, everything in ballet was in French in those days. And you refer to Lac. Swan Lake was Lac, the first of Lac de Seine. Casse-Noisette was Casse. I saw Casse Act 3, not the Nutcracker Act 3. Yeah. So anyway, the thing is that the season started in November, went on for 3 months, and by that time it did look as though the Fournier War would have to develop into a real war. And at that stage I took my lack of courage in my hands. I have to explain this. To me, war meant World War I trenches.
Yep.
I'd seen All Quiet on the Western Front. And the prospect of finishing up in a trench with a bayonet in my hands, just absolutely horrifying. I'm a coward. I admit it. But if I was met a German with a bayonet in my hand, I know who'd get the bayonet. It won't be him.
No, okay.
So anyway, I determined that my technical skill, I didn't mind engineering. I didn't mind going up in a plane and crashing. That I can face. I couldn't face a person with a bayonet in my hand. I couldn't do that.
Hand to hand.
So I joined the Air Force. And they accepted me, much to my surprise, because I was so thin.
But you're so tall.
I had a history of tuberculosis, and I was short-sighted. I wore glasses. But the point is...
6'4", short-sighted,
yes.
tubercular.
No, I didn't have tuberculosis, but they went and X-rayed me.
Right, yes.
And of course the X-ray showed my tuberculosis scars, which meant I would never get it again.
No.
And I was healthy. I was very healthy. They accepted me. And they accepted me because of my engineering skills. Now, this means that my engineering skills saved my life. That's my interpretation of it. I called my autobiography, Luck Was My Lady. Every time something happened, I was bloody lucky. What happened was, when I joined the Air Force, first I had to do some square bashing, which were awful. Marching up in the squares and saluting and running and form and that kind of thing. And then they sent me to a retraining camp to train me for making my airplane parts.
All right.
In Watford, which is roughly like Frankston in Melbourne, and I was living in Bayswater, which is something like Footscray.
All right.
And the school, the retraining school, started at 7 in the morning. I had to get at 5 to get there by underground, and God knows how long, because I had to take a bus at the other end. At the end of it, I went in there. The trouble was, I knew more than the instructors. I was a very highly skilled toolmaker. I still am. Although I'm not practicing it anymore, it comes in handy at times, the knowledge. At any rate, within a week or two, I became an instructor. I learned differential calculus. I'd never done it before.
Oh, right.
And I was teaching the other kids differential calculus. I knew nothing about it. I knew a little about it. They knew nothing about it.
Right.
And I was pretty boring. I said, when am I going to get back to work and in the Air Force and all that kind of thing? And one day there's something. When I was writing that book, I was given 6 weeks to complete the autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nobody I could refer to. I could not remember how on earth I got out of that camp. What happened? Long after the book came out, it suddenly came to me. I remember there was a poster, notices.
Mm-hmm.
On it was a poster saying, wanted, a temporary toolmaker, urgently. A factory in Water Street, London, had lost a toolmaker for whatever reason, and they temporarily needed a replacement. And they asked for volunteers. So I went and asked for it, and applied for it. And I went down there and started work down there. 100 yards from Piccadilly Circus in a modern building, beautiful factory.
But weren't you meant to be in the Air Force?
I was, but I was sent there by the Air Force.
Oh, I see. Right.
The Air Force put me into a training camp.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You see?
Okay.
Then they put
you into that.
Well, somebody asked for a temporary toolmaker. I went down there. I mean, I didn't think of it as being military duty, but I was controlled by the Air Force.
Mm. Well,
the funny part of it is, and I don't know what happened, but they never took me out of it. I spent the rest of the war there.
You were lost.
I mean, I know, but the funny part of it all, at the end of the war, I was never discharged. The things I could have gone, but wait for it. This is a good story. Are we coming near the end of this particular session? It's a good story to finish up with. You see, at the end of the war, Churchill got knocked out by Attlee, the Labour government, socialist government as they were called. They kept all the wartime regulations. Now, when there was no more work for me, my employer, who'd been paying me £2.38 a week, a lot more than 30 shillings, said there's no more work. So I went to the Labour Exchange and said, I want to leave. I want to go back to the theatre. Oh, no, you can't. You're a toolmaker. Under the new laws, which Attlee kept, the wartime laws that everything must be done for the good of the country, I was a toolmaker. The only job I could take was a job as a toolmaker. I went back to my boss. I said, I'm sorry, they wouldn't find me a different job as a toolmaker. If I'm going to be a toolmaker, I'd rather be here in Piccadilly Circus,
Right. I can imagine that.
And he said, well, listen, how about if you took unpaid leave? So I took unpaid leave. As far as the British government's concerned, I'm still working there. I joined the Air Force and I never got discharged. I never got demob pay.
Listen,
it saved my life.
We're going to have to finish on that mad note.
Yes.
I mean, what is that? John, I hope we see you back here again in the not too distant future. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been marvellous. You've been listening to Interludes with Chris Mackenzie.